organizational change is a key component to any successful digital transformation. I'm Kyler Cheatham, and I'm here with Brian Potts, Chief Client Officer at Third Stage Consulting Group, and today we're going to talk about how organizational change should fit into your digital strategies. Thanks so much for joining me today, Brian.
Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. So when it comes to organizational change, a lot of times that can be an afterthought for different businesses going through a transformation. Where should organizational change fit within your strategy?
I think everybody actually knows the answer to this because we've been preaching this for years. You need to do it up front early and have the intention of managing organizational change from the very beginning. I think the biggest issue that we find is companies are aware of it, but they don't do anything about it, thinking we're better off than our competitors, than other people implementing. Everybody wants to change, we're good. Yeah, we'll figure it out as we go. Mm-hmm. And that's a call for failure right there.
And so let's unpack that a little bit. If you don't have organizational change within your strategy or a change plan, is your transformation going to fail?
I'd say confidently yes. Now, with some hesitation of that is the term organizational change doesn't need to be a standalone. So let's clarify what that is. Sure. Organizational change management isn't a siloed offering that a consultant brings in that you do internally. Sometimes it is, but it doesn't need to be. The concept of managing change and understanding people needs to be embedded in your software transformation itself. So you can put in pieces of organizational change without having a called out organizational change management plan, as long as you're aware that people are going to be asked to change and that people don't want to change, you'll be good.
And so talking about people not wanting to change, how can you understand that and be aware of it before experiencing any disruption within your project?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to understand the truth behind that. So just think of your own self and going through life. Look at all the transformations that we've had as for those that are, I'm dating myself, but when the internet came, when mobile phones came, when Uber, what did we do? That transformation, just getting the comfort to go to a different way than you've been doing things in the past. That's what we're asking people to do now with this digital transformation that you're going through as an organization. So the first step is just understanding that there is going to be some natural resistance, intentional or not. People, not that they don't want to change, they just don't understand change, they're not ready for it, and they need help getting through it. Once you understand that, then you can map out an appropriate approach to. Second step would be assessing change and the potential resistance, impacts of change. So the next thing you want to do is map out some form of an organizational readiness assessment. We recommend agnostic surveys, kind of anonymous surveys that people can state their true feelings. Sometimes focus groups are good ways to go about it. And tied with that, you want to look at the concept of change impact. So when you're talking about defining software is going to bring this great new future state.
Right.
We are here now. Mm-hmm. Look at the gap between those two. And the bigger that gap is, frankly, the more benefit your business is going to get, but the more difficult it's going to be for people to adopt to that change. So if you can measure that degree of gap between the current and future state, that's a great start.
And how does culture fit into understanding organizational change, or what effect that will have on your business and your journey throughout your digital transformation?
Yeah, culture is a very deep concept when it comes to change because you've got an organizational culture, but then sometimes you've got subcultures within that.
Sure.
A lot of times we see these transformations. Let's say you're a global organization with many siloed operations. If your goal is to bring everything under one solution and one standardized process, what you're looking to do is consolidate and actually change to a degree cultures within that organization into standardized culture as well as technology. That's a pretty big shift.
Sure.
So you need to absolutely take culture consideration. Look at your independent organization. I mean, if you're a small manufacturing shop in the Midwest and everybody lives within a 10-mile drive, it's a different cultural change. You're still going to have some subcultures, but it's very different than if you've got overseas operations in various locations.
Definitely. It sounds like it's unique to each business. So when going through these assessments or these action steps, do companies do that internally, or what is the best way to make sure you're actually getting good data as opposed to kind of false perceptions where people might not be completely telling you the truth?
Yeah, so for an accurate assessment, an anonymous assessment needs to be done by a third party.
Okay.
You will not, if it's run through HR, if it's run through any level of leadership in the organization, you will not get accurate feedback. People
Did
know
you
that.
hear that?
If it's coming with, internal, people are going to vary their responses.
Right.
If you can confirm that it's done anonymously, that it goes to a third party, and that management at your company doesn't have access to individual responses, then you'll get a more accurate feedback.
And so knowing there can be, speaking of management, sometimes a gap between what is actually happening and what the executive perception is. How can you help kind of executives understand what their current culture is so that they're ready for that change impact?
Yeah, that's a great one. The concept of executive alignment, misalignment, misunderstanding is pretty strong in a lot of cases. What we try to do to help leverage that is sharing results of surveys and assessments goes a long way. That on top of some level of education, and a lot of times executives just aren't aware. There's a lot going on.
Right,
Most businesses are running 100
yeah.
miles an hour right now, trying to navigate supply chains and everything else going on.
Sure.
They're not really thinking about necessarily what's going on with every individual and groups and people in the organization. They just think everything's fine because they hear it from management who's trying to look at themselves, and they just go on their way. So bridging that gap is a matter of education, and again, you need a third party to do that because you're not going to have upward delegation and people come and say, hey, we need to change this, because then they're putting themselves at risk. You need a third party in there to help bridge those together, and at least go through that alignment and education for the executive team.
Yeah. So now that we've assessed the culture, we've presented the data to the executives, and we have some sort of change plan, when you identify those resistance areas that you've seen surface from these surveys and different activities, how do you address those resistant pieces?
Well, that's what you mentioned just a minute ago, the change plan, and this is what drives that change plan.
Okay, got it.
Is identifying, once you know areas of resistance, where people are sitting, then you can outline an actual change management plan. I think the number one view of change management, if you remember just one thing from today, remember that the concept of organizational change management is realizing that at the end of the day, every individual involved in a transformation ultimately cares about what's in it for me. And if we can talk to that voice in everybody's head, through education, communication, and understanding and alignment with what's going on, will be good. That's the most difficult part, is everybody thinks differently. Humans are very strange creatures, and we're all thinking slightly different things. We have different influences, impacts. We can group some of us together. Some of us will stand out. We just need to understand that we've got those variations, and we need to talk to those and handle that through that organizational change plan.
Excellent. And so knowing that, kind of the what's in it for me approach, how does the ERP or digital transformation core team fit into that?
So the core team needs to include a percentage, percentage essentially of organizational change ownership. When you're delivering the organizational change management as a thing or a service, a majority of that needs to come internally. You can't just outsource change management. So you need to have adoption of change tactics within the core team and your delivery of the overall transformation. So that needs to be embedded in the core team itself. You need to have some ties to whether it's a change committee, user group, change agents, and your setup of change management. That needs to have reporting and correlation with the core team.
So almost it sounds like in those kind of learning from your transformation actions or project health checks, if you will, change management should be a main metric in that.
In every single one. And what you need on the outside of that, and a lot of people say, okay, well, we've got somebody who's watching change.
Right.
Understand what that means. Ideally, you've got, called a change management firm or kind of a leadership group. That's, one thing that Third Stage does a lot of is we help guide change initiatives. We help identify, educate, and train the people that are going to be involved in that transformation, so that it all ties together. When you go to a steering committee meeting or a status review, you've got that input on here's where we are with the change plan, and understanding how it fits into the overall implementation plan.
So say if you're an organization and you've gone through the awareness, the assessment process, and then you're actually implementing the technology, but you're struggling with user adoption, which sounds like something that a lot of organizations struggle with. You may have core training plan that you've activated, but you don't actually have the end user using the new technology. What's something that you can do to kind of shift that behavior?
Yeah. First, understand that that's normal. That's the whole purpose of change management. Is that gap to getting people to use the system is the trigger. I think setting up training is the great environment for that. But you need to have a training plan that matches, going back to the mention of culture, that matches your culture. How are people going to learn? What's going to get their attention? Because as long as they can push off transferring to a new system, they're going to do it. Until you say this is the drop dead date, if you don't give them if you don't align training until a week before then, they're not going to train until a week before then. If you give them just an open say, hey, use this when you can, in most cases they're not going to. You just want to understand that it needs to be a handheld guide through the training concept. Make sure you're setting up your sandbox environment, letting people really get comfortable with it. Not assuming that as soon as you go live, people are just that have been through the training once are just going to adopt.
Right.
They only have to press one button and it's that simple. It's going to take them some time, and that's normal.
Gotcha. And what about the aspect that we see a lot of times in maybe our medium or small business clients of that tribal knowledge, that one person or couple team that have worked there for 40 years and adopting that knowledge and scaling that to this new technology? How can you go about doing that in the most efficient way?
Well, that concept of tribal knowledge is what drives the digital transformation in a lot of cases. That concept needs to be brought into the ERP. Ideally, you're doing that in the evaluation stage. You're drawing from these people what that tribal knowledge is and validating that technology can actually map into that way of doing things. So what you're doing is you're documenting the processes that have been tribal knowledge, putting that into the system, and it's then through the training, everybody's adopting that quote tribal knowledge, and it's not tribal anymore.
Absolutely. Well, that makes a lot of sense. And something I want to talk about is kind of addressing organizational change within our current climate. So we talked about in some of our earlier videos and content, the challenge with supply chain shortages, labor scarcity, those types of things. What are some things that companies can do or implement to ensure that when their business is disruptive or their supply chain is broken, that they're able to make sure that their organization is not going through the same sort of disruption?
I think that's a fantastic question for especially today, and I'll focus on the labor shortage. People are jumping ship like left and right. So what we're seeing is somebody doesn't really understand what they're heading into. They hear you're going to have to work a few extra hours. We're doing an ERP implementation. Buckle up. They're like, no, I'm going to leave. That's the trend right now, and we're seeing it. It's frustrating. I think that'll wane out over time because eventually people are going to have to get back to work. But in the interim, what you can do is I'd say overload a little bit on change management. Make sure that you're over communicating to people, letting them know here's what to expect. Here's what we're going to do about it. We understand this is going to happen. This is going to happen. We're calling this out. We want you to be part of this. And also share the long-term benefits. Say your job's going to potentially be easier after this. Say, maybe some incentives, whether it's financial or otherwise, to those that help out with the project that's, on the project team supporting the go live, that maybe even people that stay through go live. Say, we're going to give everybody a bonus or, a week vacation, whatever the case might be. And just predict that any level of disruption or confusion, people are really agitated right now. So just be ready for that and maybe over assess for change management a little bit.
Gotcha. It sounds like what you're saying is you're going to give third stage employees a vacation, is what I heard.
Well, if they want to take one, we'll have a change management exercise after that.
There we go. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for all of these great tips. I think some of them are so incredibly relevant right now. And a lot of times I think what organizations don't understand about change management is you can start before you even implement any sort of software, and that's going to make it most successful. Would you agree?
Well, not only can you should.
Yes.
It's not an option to start change management early. Let's just I think we can get everybody to agree to that. And now that everybody's nodding their head, we'll do that. You need to hold to that when you actually start looking at budgets and you start looking at timelines, realizing what you're actually walking into. Remember that you nodded your head when Brian said you need to start change management early, and hold to that.
Excellent. Well, all great tips. So if our community here is looking for more information on organizational change management, what would you recommend?
Yeah, we love talking about this stuff. If you want to talk further, have questions, please reach out. Our information's listed here below. Feel free to give me a call personally. I have a passion for the concept of change management. Also, please subscribe to our channels, our YouTube channel, and go to our website, thirdstageconsult-consulting.com, and find we've got a lot written and published on the concept of change, what it actually means to employees and leadership to go through a change like this. So. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, all excellent recommendations. As Brian said, please head over to our YouTube channel. We have a specific playlist for all things organizational change management. Our new videos come out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and we will see you next time.